welcome back to my channel. I'm finally doing another cooking video. I thought today we would finish up with the Kalua pig recipe I did in my last cooking video. If you remember, we took the pork butt into the slow cooker, added some smoked pork, and then bagged the finished product in quart bags in 1 pound portions. Now, I do that because you can freeze those portions and use them later, and that's what I did. And so basically, after you put them in the freezer, nice and flat, makes it easier to store. You can defrost them and cook them later on. You don't need very much things. The cabbage, of course, and then I like to add soy sauce. Now, soy has gluten in it, so if you're gluten intolerant, you're going to use something like coconut aminos, or depending on your tolerance level, Bragg's aminos. Reach behind you, I've got some coconut aminos right here. These you can find on Amazon because, you know, Amazon has everything. I get mine at Whole Foods though. And we go through it like we would soy sauce. Don't need much of it though. So what I'm going to do is take the cabbage and cut it in half. When you get the head of lettuce, it doesn't really matter how big you buy it. I like to buy it when the stores have them real big and then cut them up and freeze them. Because those big heads of lettuce and cauliflower, they're so awesome. But this is about an average size. If we take, let's see, this pint jar, there's some scale for you to give you an idea of how big this head is. I'm going to take it and cut it in half. About half the head of lettuce is what you want to start with for a pot of Kalua pig and cabbage. You want to keep the other half close at hand, just in case you decide you need a little bit more. Cabbage is one of those foods that, for a dish like this, really stretches out the dish so that you can feed more people with the same amount of food. Well, I guess actually it's not really the same amount of food. You just get more greens and so on. So now that I've got it in half, I'm going to put this in quarters so that I can cut this core out of the center. If you look, the core goes up like that. And this piece really isn't all that good to eat. So we'll just cut that off and throw that away. And cut that in half, and then we're going to take this at an angle. Cut that out. And voila. There you go. Do that to both halves. Now at this point, all you're going to do really is just shred the cabbage. I'm going to place it in this bowl here on the side so that we have it close at hand. And to shred it, you're basically going to take that quarter and cut little ribbons. You don't want it too thick, but you want those ribbons to be somewhat uniform, because then it cooks a little bit easier. And the closer you get to the edge, the harder obviously it will be to cut, period. And what I usually do then is just push all of this to the side and push this on the side. So then I've got a smaller piece to work with, and I'll keep doing those same ribbons. Once you've got that first half done, continue on with the second half. When you're done with the second half, you're going to cut up the other half. Well, I guess, why am I calling them halves? When you're done with the first 2 quarters, you're going to cut up the second half the same exact way, but you're going to store them in a different dish. And you're going to store them in a different dish so you know which half is which, and you don't put them all in all at once. when you're putting them in that bowl, you also want to start taking these ribbons apart so that they're all separated. It's not technically necessary, but when you're combining it with the meat, it'll make it much easier to move everything around if it's all broken up. Voila! There's half your dish right there. Now let's take this meat and get that cooking. Now when you get to the stove, you don't need a fancy pot like what I have. In fact, for years I cooked with a cheap aluminum pot. Loved it. But I got married recently and got this fancy pot, so we'll use that. You are going to turn your stove on to about medium-high heat, and you're going to let that pan warm up. When you can feel the heat right about here above the pot, you want to go ahead and drop your meat in. You don't need any oil or anything because your pork is already pretty fatty. So as you can see, we've changed pots, and a lot of that is because the red pot you saw earlier, it was a bit small for the amount of food that we were cooking. What we did is put the Kalua pork in and then just heat it up. It only takes about a minute or two, maybe 3 minutes. You're going to judge that by yourself to figure if it's warm enough. Once it is, you're going to take that bowl of cabbage and dump it in, and then mix it up so that you've got a lot of that meat moved from the bottom to the top. And what that's going to do is allow the cabbage to heat up and steam. You're going to cover it and then let it sit for another couple minutes so that the heat creates condensation, allows that cabbage to cook. Once you've done that, you're going to come in and stir it again so that you have that cabbage that's at the top at the bottom, and that allows that to cook as well. Yes, because you're not moving a lot of things around, it is going to cause some of the whatever's on the bottom, whether it's meat or cabbage, to get a little bit crispy. This is the point where you're going to start adding your coconut aminos or your soyu. You're only going to add about 2 or 3 tablespoons. With most liquids, if it doesn't have one of these lids that stop the flow, usually 2 or 3 turns allows you to get enough in there. And all this does really is just add a little bit of flavor in. You're going to distribute that again by moving things around. I'm going to hold this up a little bit so you can see at the bottom. This is the crispy stuff that I'm talking about. As you're moving things around, go ahead and scrape at that. This is where a wooden spoon is always a good tool to use over a rubber spatula, because you can move that around. Don't worry about this burning because that is actually rather good to eat. And as the cabbage creates liquid, that's going to be pretty yummy. There'll be a point that you won't even recognize that as crispy bits. You'll see, you can already see how the cabbage is already broken down a lot, so that it becomes more water than anything else. At this point, we've broken up a lot of the crispy from the bottom, so I'm going to cover this up again so we can create more liquid. Okay, so after a couple minutes, go ahead and take that lid off, release the steam, give it another couple good stirs. As you can see, we've got some nice breakdown of the cabbage. Even the crispy bits are a lot softer. And I think I'm going to put another couple tablespoons of the coconut aminos. You could definitely measure it, but I like to eyeball it and just guess. It seems like I'm putting a lot, but remember that the flow on the lid of this is stunted so that it really just drips out rather than pours. And this dish actually feeds a couple people, so that amount of salt gets spread out between everybody. course, once each person plates out theirs, they're going to add salt and more soy sauce or aminos as they feel necessary. This dish, with this amount of food, I've had no problem spreading this out to my family of 5 with some extra for lunch. A lot of it depends on the appetites of the people in your family. I've stirred that in, and that cabbage broke down pretty well. If you notice, this is still mostly meat now. This is why you reserve your second half, so that you can add it in later if necessary. Now, for some people, this will be enough because that's a good portion of meat. But I like to make sure that everybody's eating a lot of vegetables, because we certainly don't get enough in. So I'm going to take that second half in and drop it into the pan by handfuls. And I'm going to start with 3 handfuls, which is about another quarter of the head of cabbage. And then you just rinse and repeat everything that you've done already. Once you put in the new cabbage, you're going to stir it around to distribute the new raw cabbage. And then you're going to put the lid back on to allow that to steam. Okay, we've gone back in, and it looks to be like a good consistency. From here, you're going to take about, I don't like to serve with this wooden spoon, so I usually take tongs. You can take a slotted spoon as well to portion out. Well, actually, let's do that. Let's take a slotted spoon. From here, you're basically just going to serve, portion out as you see fit for each person. Little kids, obviously, you're going to give a little bit less, maybe this much. Older kids and adults, you're going to give a little bit more. I usually take about 2 cups worth and put it in my bowl. And when I serve, I do it with a pair of tongs rather than the wooden spoon that I use. And that's more of a preference thing. You can use the wooden spoon you just had. You can use a slotted spoon, or like I said, tongs. Once you have that all in your plate, don't forget to turn off the stove and take your food off the heat, because obviously it's still hot, it's still going to cook. I added a little bit of rice to my bowl, so this is what we've got. This is what we've got going on here. Hope you enjoyed that. Leave some comments below if you have any questions. And as always, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and like as well. Thanks for watching.